Welcome, everybody, to Sippin' and Shippin'. I'm your host, Brian Weinstein. We'll be kicking it here every other Friday, quenching your thirst for an insider's take to enhance your customer experience. So grab your drink of choice, kick back, it's Sippin' and Shippin' time. All right, welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sippin' and Shippin'. I am your host, Brian Weinstein, and with me, again this week, it's like she cannot get away, Caitlin Pushtal.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
Good. Are you trying to get away? Are you making any effort?
I am, actually. In lieu of the topic of conversation today, all of my responses will be automated, and I'm actually taking off for the weekend. So as excited as I am for the conversation and our special guests, I'm just going to go fully automated on this one.
Well, because you've got to get out of Dodge.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Exactly. All right, and we have with us today from our very own engineering automation solutions team, Rob Schabinger and Terry Neidiffer. How are you fellas doing?
Hey there. Great to be a part of this.
We don't have a lot of engineers on the program. As a matter of fact, I think it's pretty safe to say you two might be the first ever. No, I take that back. Andrew Bagwell was on our episode about a year or so ago.
Not having engineers on a podcast may be the smartest decision you've ever made.
Well, I do have to say that for a while, Terry and I were debating starting our own podcast called, we were going to call it Shots with Robots. But you guys were doing such a good job that we decided to leave the heavy lifting to you guys. So.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yes.
Shots with robots. Bringing it back, Brian, to the beverage reference, right?
Always. Yeah, the problem with having engineers on the program is like it's like Caitlin and I can't really go toe to toe on the intelligence level, and I'm not speaking for Caitlin because she's brilliant, but I'm just saying.
I'm with you, Brian.
Well, the problem with having engineers is we can't go toe to toe in actually talking with people, so it's okay.
Yeah, I've been in a couple of meetings where actually Caitlin had to take her shoes off to keep up with the math.
That's what it is.
So I don't know, and Rob and Terry, you guys can figure out who to go first, but why don't we just start out with a little bit of introductions and backgrounds with the two of you.
Sure, I'll start us off. Again, my name is Rob Schabinger. I've been with Ryder's automation team for about 2 years now. Prior to that, kind of a diverse experience, both logistics, other 3PLs, manufacturing. Prior to joining with Ryder, I was with doing logistics and supply chain consulting for about 7 years. So, became a part of Ryder's automation team as Ryder took the initiative to really expand and try to create more and more opportunities for automation to help our customers out. So really enjoy being a part of it and looking forward to talking to you guys.
And Terry?
Yeah, thanks for having us on. And yeah, Terry Neidiffer, been with Ryder here. This is my 4th year. I've been in some form of third-party logistics engineering, continuous improvement, lean solutions, et cetera, for 18 years now. So yeah.
Great. Awesome. And so this is a little bit of a different episode. A lot of our focus when we're speaking out to our audience and bringing on guests is choosing around a lot of marketing and parcel, and in some cases there's shipping into international like EU and UK. And so this we wanted to go, there's a lot of buzz around automation. And we're hearing a lot of people talk about automation. And so we're a little kind of listening to brands talk about, hey, we need to have automation, but is that really true? Like, Rob, when you're looking at brands, and I mean, a lot of people just think everybody should have automation. Is that true?
Yeah, it's interesting how it's sort of evolved. The term automation has become everyday vernacular nowadays, where we're driving electric cars, we are using smartphones, we're 60 Minutes episodes about the newest and greatest automation, and
60 Minutes episodes that you watch on your refrigerator, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's interesting how it's evolved, and automation has been a part of industry for probably 100 years. Henry Ford and the first assembly lines and things like that. But it was really sort of segmented specifically more to the manufacturing sector for a long period of time. One thing I always say to people is that variation is the enemy of automation. And for processes that are highly repeatable, that are being done, if you're manufacturing 1 million widgets a year, one place I worked manufactured, again, going back to sipping and shipping, I worked at a company that manufactured wine corks. And we manufactured 4 billion wine corks a year. It's just something that you could never do without automation. Right. But within the logistics and distribution world, there has always been so much variation that it's been hard to get automation up and going and really make it financially viable. And then within the last 10 years, the amount of strides for automation have really gone through the roof and made them much more commercially available. So it's something that has really become a new buzzword in the industry. And the toughest part is finding the right fit for every customer.
Yeah, and I think there's that ROI component of when certain automation makes sense. And I think there's sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I think there's sort of a belief that you're going to replace people with automation and it's going to protect you. So the automation is really geared to help the associates perform better and more efficiently. Yeah,
there's a ton of ways that, we look at automation from a standpoint of actually making the job better and safer. Right. So when you think about a lot of the equipment, there's a lot of automated processes now that ensure that your hands are kept out of the way of moving parts, or the parts of the process that could get hot or anything else that poses a danger can help automate those things. So yeah, we look at automation a lot to help reduce back strains, reduce repetitive motion injuries. That's a huge one. We look at it a lot to make the process better so that the company itself is efficient and moving forward and hiring more people and expanding and those types of things. So yeah, definitely automation is one of those things where it doesn't solve all your problems, but if you approach it correctly, it can definitely help you out.
Yeah, I love to hear that. We know how important people are in our business and keeping people safe. So that's great to hear of using associates and automation in tandem. To Brian's point before, a lot of times I find during the sales process, startup and emerging brands, they confuse bad processes or a bad relationship with a 3PL with, I need to replace that with automation. Like my next solution needs to be automated. Terry or Rob, whoever wants to take this one, can you tell us a little bit about Rob? Okay, Rob, could you tell us a little bit about some entry level, and I'm doing air quotes, entry level automations or simple investments that smaller brands can make early in the life of their brand?
Yeah, I think that there's always value to be found. Usually the more what I would call sort of simplistic or commoditized type of automation are really there to replace repetitive tasks. If you are building a bunch of shipping boxes every day, can you get some automation that would have the ability to erect the cartons automatically instead of a person who's spending 8 hours a day taping boxes together? If you have, if you're shrink wrapping a lot of pallets, can you utilize a machine to help make that task that you're doing frequently during a given time period? Can you use that to create time savings and efficiency gains for the operation? There's a lot of those kind of straightforward ones that can replace the frequent activities and try to make that a little simpler, and those carry much lower price tags and can usually result on a better return on investment for some brands that are more emerging and maybe don't have the maturity or the consistent volume levels of others.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Rob. I think for a lot of the smaller, customers, the ones that are emerging and growing, the biggest thing about growth that I see with supply chain is the unknown. And so, especially during those fledgling years where you're getting off the ground or even into, some of the later years, but still young in the life cycle, there's so much change, whether it's that you're deciding how you want to go into brick and mortar, whether it's you're deciding how you want your marketing campaigns within your e-com websites to function. Those can all have a very, very different impact on the units per order and the overall profiles that your your supply chain is trying to fulfill, right? So point being there, to Rob's point exactly, you want to keep a lot of that entry level automation very kind of compartmentalized, very flexible, very fluid, where you can kind of pick it up and move it, whether it be to a larger facility as you grow, whether it be because now you're shipping a whole lot more poly bags than boxes, or whether you're going the other way. All those types of things are going to change over the course of your, especially the starting years, right? So keep it small.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we have people that come in with preconceived notions that automation is the way to go. But I mean, we've even recently spoken with companies where there's just no ROI. What's the point of using AMR or goods to person for an account when you're really not going to get any real ROI on the automation itself? And if you keep it simple, to your point, those lower level activities that are meaningful, right? If you can make more boxes an hour, or if you can auto bag and an auto tape, there you can get value without breaking the bank.
And I think another major takeaway, especially as companies are going through that maturity cycle, is you always want to develop good processes. Terry mentioned lean, and a lot of continuous improvement, a lot of industrial engineering concepts are really process driven, and you want to develop good solid processes and look for ways to automate those good processes. A lot of companies will come to us and say, well, please, we just need to put in a bunch of conveyor to move stuff around. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you're not just building infrastructure around bad processes. You want to make sure you've gone through and done good evaluation and try to optimize your processes, and then look for automation that can be a good augmentation on top of that.
And so when you start to get into this, Rob, when you get to maybe like a phase 2 level of automation, right, where you are talking about AMR or goods to person, what are some of the metrics that you're looking for that you say, okay, this is the right solution or direction to go?
There's a lot of different sort of sub-segments of the supply chain automation world. Looking at it from the inbound and outbound side, how do you get product out of containers you're getting from vendors, and how do you get them loaded into containers that are going out to your end customer? So there's options to look at there. If you look at a general distribution facility, picking and the consolidation of orders, getting the right product together to go to the right end customer is usually the highest percentage of effort and labor associated with that process. And so that's usually where a lot of the automation focus starts. Brian, you mentioned AMRs, automated mobile robots. So what those have come and are now available to help in a lot of e-commerce type facilities are, we're still utilizing people and their ability and, their knowledge base to execute the picking part of the process. Yep. But what we wanted to automate were some of the non-value added steps in the process, the travel time, the walking, things like that are not adding value or not helping you get product out the door. That's the type of stuff that AMRs are able to help. So, yep. There's a lot of technologies now where robots are there to hold and travel and transport product, and it helps you get more throughput out with the same number of people, which is really the goal as you start growing and scaling up your business.
Yeah. And minimizing fatigue, right? I mean,
exactly.
The fatigue factor, right? Exactly. No, that's a great point.
Yeah, and remember that historically automation, it's evolved heavily, especially the last 10 years. But historically, automation has meant bolting a bunch of conveyors and kind of going vertical with pick modules and different things like that really, really, really restrict your ability to flex in the future.
Right.
If you have to get a larger facility, let's say you're in 50,000 square feet and you decide to put in, some type of bolted mezzanine on that's going to get you, some square footage going vertical. At some point, if you keep growing, you got to get out of that facility. And now that thing is effectively a boat anchor. It's just steel that has no value really to the next person. Whereas AMRs, now you can kind of, pick those up and move with you. So a lot of the newer technology is a lot more flexible and a lot more growth capability. Another example there is traditionally with those conveyor systems, I have an entire system that is all networked together. And when I need to grow, I hit a point that's kind of stair-stepped where I have to replace motors, replace sorters, replace massive pieces of whatever the bottleneck of that system is. Whereas with AMRs, I can just kind of add more AMRs and spread the space. So it's a much more flexible solution for the customers who do have, unknowns in their supply chain, or they know they're going to be changing drastically over the next, 5 years.
And,
Sure.
sorry about that, Kayla. Another point on top of that is not just as you grow, but even as your business flexes throughout the year. A lot of e-commerce companies are heavy, leading up to the Christmas time. Others might be seasonal in other seasons. And, the term build the church for Easter Sunday, if you're going with a heavy infrastructure, heavy steel-based automation strategy, you're going to have to build something that will handle capacities that you might not be facing on a day-to-day basis. So the more flexible you can really also add a lot of value.
Makes sense. Okay, so we have level 1, which is kind of low entry, low cost. It's for repetitive tasks, very little variance. So we're doing auto tapers, box erectors. Level 2, Now you're incorporating some lean concepts. You have some AMRs, maybe some robotics. Now you have good processes in place. Now, Terry, kick us into gear level 3. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, Rob's really the expert on level 3. That's getting really gnarly. That's getting into some really fun stuff, right?
Terry doesn't have that level of clearance to talk about phase 3.
level 3 unlocked. Call in Rob.
Yeah, we call it DEFCON 3 here.
DEFCON 3.
No, sorry, Robbie. I was gonna say, but before level 3, one thing I would mention is for a lot of customers, I think there is a point between, call it in phase 2 kind of, where before you ever get into kind of a phase 3 automation discussion, you really want to squeeze as much as you can out of your WMS capabilities around clustering and batching. And so, clustering for anybody listening who doesn't know, that's where you're grouping multiple orders together and treating it as one order. So you're picking all of SKU A and you're putting one of them into box A, one of them into box C, one of them into box G. And you may have 10 boxes on that overall cart or vessel that you're using. Batch picking is where I'm taking all the orders that are like a single unit, and everybody's ordering, let's say, the newest iPhone 15, right? So they go out and buy that iPhone 15. I'm going to take all 20 of these orders. I'm going to go out and pick 20 iPhones, but they're all going into 20 different boxes. That's batch picking. So point being, those technologies and how it effectively groups and does it logically, that's a huge step that if you really get that running correctly, that can actually give you more ROI while you're in that phase 2 world before you ever start jumping now into the deep end that Rob will tell you more about.
Yeah, I don't want to put on my nerd hat too much, but a lot of this stuff
it's already on, man.
Might be too late, but a lot of this really is dependent on our data capabilities, and I think companies know that their data capabilities grow as they grow. And as you transition to the much more sophisticated automation opportunities that are out there, a lot of that is based off of data that is collected throughout the history of your organization, and really getting an understanding of what has happened in the past and start projecting what do we anticipate will happen in the future, because that'll drive you towards the right direction. But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say that, the next step is where a lot of things have evolved in the last 5 or 10 years. Steps 1 and 2 are relatively low capital expenditure expectations. As you transition to a more mature operation and start to see that your throughput would warrant additional capital expenditures, that's when you can really start to find optimization and efficiency gains by doing it. The number one area that has evolved in the recent past has been the concept of goods to person. So in a traditional distribution environment, you have the goods stored in shelves or racks or wherever you have stuff. You have stuff stored and people go to the product to pick it and get it to the end customer. The evolution has been creating automated infrastructure and automated systems that will store the product and then bring the product to the person. So we have automation types where we're able to store tens of thousands of SKUs, hundreds of thousands of items in a given area, and the people that are responsible for doing the picking never leave their workstation because the product is brought to them through an automated process. So again, like I was talking before, the goal of this is to remove non-value added activities out of the processes.
Yep.
And walking and travel and transportation is one of the major culprits for that. So these automation options are really doing a great job of bringing the goods to the person and avoiding the person having to get to the goods.
Yeah, and I guess, Rob, with each one of those steps, right, you could be coupling different automation components together. It could be a goods to person to a put wall or some sort of sortation system after that, right? But doesn't that, with these brands, right, don't you really need to be good and sure of the direction of your company moving forward before you start making investments, right? Doesn't it get more complicated if your business evolves and let's say you're 100% direct to consumer and 3 years from now you find yourself as 30% wholesale or brick and mortar? Isn't there a risk of going too early into those types of automation?
Yeah, there definitely is. That's why, you want to make sure that any decisions you're making are based off, data-driven, factors, understanding the direction, strategic. A lot of times we'll spend time with customers and understand their strategic objectives, not just the numbers in the spreadsheet moving forward, but what is your strategic objective? What do you expect to be doing the next 5 years? Yeah. Because by the time we're talking about this level of automation, we're talking about things that have return on investments in 3 to 5 year range, and are really wanting to guide you to the next level, and into the future for what you're looking to accomplish.
Yeah, keep in mind, that transportation is going to be 2 to 3x the spend within the four walls of the warehouse as a general rule of thumb, right? So, when we're talking about, the future, especially for some of the smaller, organizations out there, it's one thing to say, hey, I think I'm going to be here and this profile is going to be there in 3 years or in 5 years and where that's going to move. It's another thing to say, yeah, but what if I now want to split my, network so that I have a facility that's in the Midwest and I have a facility that's in the Southwest, right? Now all of a sudden I have half the space in that facility that I need, and now my automation looks quite a bit different because I'm fulfilling half the volume. So a lot of times, the more, I think, important question that Rob is alluding to there is not just in the data, but also what if? So what if I all of a sudden do want to have a second facility? What if I want to ship into Canada tomorrow? What if tomorrow, the carrier networks charge me twice as much, which, you have a tendency of seeing with fuel costs as volatile as they are over the last several years. So all those different things are going to change. So I think the more you can say what if, and really vet those kind of worst case scenarios, you can really get an idea of what's going to happen to your automation, because I guarantee you one of those what ifs is going to happen.
Yeah, there's nothing that engineers like more than unplanned variables.
That's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we talk about all the time, and I know we brought this up in our pre-call a little bit, was talking about for e-commerce brands specifically, the importance around Cubiscans. I mean, talk about that, because there are definitely some benefits there, and that's probably one of your phase ones, but it's probably a good one to highlight.
Yeah, Cubiscan is important not to have a Cubiscan. It's important to have solid data on your dimensions and weights. And a Cubiscan is a tool to do that very effectively, very efficiently, and very accurately. So, if I'm very accurate with a tape measure and a small, scale, I can do the exact same thing that a Cubiscan can do. Now, I do not want to do that several hundred times a day, right? And that's where Cubiscan comes in. I don't even want to do it 100 times a day, right? That's where a Cubiscan comes in. But point being, the importance of a Cubiscan is really right-sizing all that information for a lot of the downstream processes of the supply chain. So everything from how your storage structures are set up and making sure that they're storing efficiently. If I can store twice as much product in the same sets of rack because I have my dimensions properly set up and my triggers properly moving, that's a lot of ROI back to your system without ever talking about automation. You get that set up, your replenishment triggers, having those optimized. Now you're talking about much more optimized labor and service because you got the product on the floor at the right time, ready for picking before orders ever come down to it. Slotting, cubic velocity. I can't do cubic velocity slotting, which is really, the better form of slotting as opposed to pure unit velocity. I can't do cubic velocity slotting without having accurate dimensions. And then finally, all the ergonomics that go along with it. So from a slotting perspective, I would like to zone it such that, the heavier items are in the middle, so I'm not bending or reaching for them. They're at waist level. So all those types of things are dependent on having good weights and dims. And the Cubiscan is, a method of achieving that. So yeah, the data itself, super important.
Yeah, it sounds like a common theme here is just really letting the data drive. And Brian, you said the Cubiscan is a phase one. That Cubiscan, I think, has a pretty serious price tag for maybe some of the JV folks in there. Terry, what is it, like 20? I think you said 25,000, something like that.
Yeah, it depends on, kind of all the bells and whistles you get with it. You can get the Cadillac model and it's probably, more. But what I would recommend to anybody starting off is you definitely want to have your weights and dims correct. If the way that you need to go about that to start is a tape measure, then use a tape measure. As you start to get more and more measurements, more and more SKUs, and more times that you need to take those measurements, then that'll tell you when it's smart to go ahead and start looking at a Cubiscan. But
right, and that's what that goes back to what Rob said, the repetitive tasks. Where can you replace, just in the beginning, how do you replace those repetitive tasks and leveraging automation?
Got it.
So forward thinking, I know we discussed a few different types of automations. What's ahead? What do we see coming down the pike in the future as far as automations within this distribution and fulfillment space, guys?
Yeah, I think that's really what's exciting, or I guess if you're a 40-year-old engineer, that's what's exciting. But that's really what's exciting about where the horizon is on this is as technology has gotten significantly better, the commoditization of the technology has made it more viable from a financial return on investment perspective for more and more people. So it's becoming it's not just Amazon doing it, it's a lot of companies can now cost justify putting it into place. And as technology, things like AI have changed drastically, the ability to process, again, I talk about variability, the ability to process a lot of different variable type of things through the use of AI and technology and algorithms like that. That's bringing things like robotic arms to do repetitive tasks. It's bringing optimization on how to store and how to process different orders to reduce the overall time for product to reach a customer, things like that. So, I would say that the idea of robotic arms, the idea of vision picking systems, that's really going to be the wave of the future as technologies continue to advance.
And Rob, it seems like, at least from my vantage point, the big technology move over the last, call it 5 to 10 years, has all been software driven. And I think that's going to continue kind of going forward. But there's some mechanical stuff like you were saying with robotic arms, but when you go back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, most of that automation growth and innovation in my view was more mechanical related. As advanced as you might get, you started to get into PLCs and some different things that started controlling, but a lot of it was all mechanically driven innovations. It seems like while there's some mechanical stuff with the AMRs and with the robotic arms, the software is just moving faster than a lot of people can keep up with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and we found that software is really the major differentiator with providers. Is the mechanical, the robots themselves, the bots that roll around on the ground, they're becoming commoditized. They're just the mechanical execution of what the software is describing. So that's a great point. Is as the software gets better, the learnings behind it, there's a lot of vision systems that as they pick a box, they've now learned that box and they will pick it better the next time. All of that aggregate learning is really where the leaps and bounds are occurring.
So Caitlin's real question is, when does this thing go live and destroy the human race and kill us all?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. I think a good way to kind of summarize it, a lot of people ask us about lights out warehouses. You know, that's the concept that you should be able to do an entire warehouse process, lights out, no people, and all that. And while there are segments of the process that can be done and automated completely, I'm still a believer that the best use of people is the use of, you know, their brains. And we cannot recreate the thought and knowledge and decision making that people are making. So while there are processes that can be improved through automation, we're always going to need people to make good judgments, you know, handle exceptions and things like that throughout the entire process found within a warehouse. And, you know, it's all about augmenting and putting people in a position to be successful and really utilizing what makes, you know, humans unique in that we can process that type of information. So it's always going to be a collaboration effort. It's just understanding how can we collaborate the best.
Yeah, I've
Go ahead, Brian.
No, I've been saying for a while, you know, decades ago, people would always look to the warehouses and say it's an unskilled labor. And honestly, in today's world,
Not anymore.
everyone on that floor is skilled. They have to work with some sort of technology, and in a lot of cases, to your point, use good judgment, Rob, and be able to handle all these different levels of automation, tech, WMSs. You know, there's a lot more sophistication out there today.
No,
Sure. I
agree
just got a
completely.
little nervous. I thought Rob was going in a different direction there when he said lights out. I thought he was going phase 3 on all of us. We were about to. It was over. It was a wrap.
Yeah, no, I don't think we have to worry about Terminator 2 level of stuff quite yet.
Yeah, and to Rob's point, I mean, you do hear some things about, you know, different facilities. You know, I don't see that happening with anything other than a few really niche markets that have to do with really dangerous processes.
Yeah.
So when you think about certain processes where they're dealing with either very, very caustic or explosive materials or things along those lines where you don't want people around them who are heavily exposed to the fumes or anything else like that, that's where I think you'll see some of those, you know, take a little bit more ground. You're not going to see that, in my opinion, with successful e-commerce distribution fulfillment. That is not on the horizon right now.
So, I mean, just to kind of put a bow on all this, I mean, look, you want to avoid over-engineering. You want to avoid really putting in more automation than is required, right? There has to be an ROI, and you want to make sure that you're not putting in anything in terms of the automation process that is not going to suit your business for the foreseeable few years, at least until you get your ROI back and out on that initial investment.
We haven't really talked about investment, but, you know, it's really hard to get an ROI less than a year.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're thinking about what you need to support from your business perspective, I mean, by default, that's kind of telling you that your automation needs to support what you're going to be doing, you know, beyond 12 months, right? That's hard for all of us to crystal ball. Everything from volatile economies to how people are going to purchase things to your own competitors, all those types of things. If you're not getting ROI within a year, again, all of your planning needs to ensure that it's including that 12 to 24 or even 36-month mark.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. This is a different, as I mentioned when we first started this episode, this was a different direction. This is different for our audience, and I hope this really resonates. You know, there's a lot of decision making and people keep going around this buzzword automation, but clearly there's a time and a place for it where it can help your business, but you don't want to get too far out over your skis on it as well.
Yeah, you always want to use it as a tool, not as a cure-all.
Yeah, augment. Augment, don't replace, right?
There you go. All right, appreciate it, guys. Terry, Rob, thank you very much. Caitlin, you want to walk us out?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Terry. Make sure you check us out every other Friday at sippinandchippin.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.